Every city has its secrets, but few are as terrifying as the story of a serial killer who terrorized the small provincial town of Havil. It was said that he was a shadow, a mysterious phantom who appeared out of nowhere and vanished without a trace. It all began in the autumn, when nights grew longer and darkness fell earlier. The first victim was a young woman named Laura. She was returning home late one evening from work. Friends and family knew her as a cautious and prudent girl. But that night, something went wrong. Her body was found the next morning near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. There were no obvious signs of struggle on her body, but her face was contorted in a mask of horror. The next victim appeared 2 weeks later. A middle-aged man, George, also found near the same warehouse. Each time, the crime scene was the same: no visible signs of violence, but an expression of extreme terror on the face. The police were baffled, trying to find any clue. Fear gripped the town, and the streets emptied after dark. The stories grew more eerie. It was said that the killer used something invisible to commit the murders. Rumors circulated about an evil spirit or demon haunting Havil. People locked themselves in their homes, installing extra locks, but nothing could stop the ominous shadow. One of the frightened residents was an old lady named Agatha. She lived alone in an old house near the woods and rarely ventured out. One night, she heard creaking floorboards. Her heart raced. She knew she was supposed to be alone. Trembling, Agatha took an old lamp and stepped out of her bedroom. In the dim light, she saw a shadow sliding along the wall. She tried to scream, but her voice wouldn't obey. The shadow approached, and Agatha felt icy breath on her neck. She closed her eyes, praying for salvation. When she opened them again, the shadow was gone. Agatha was left alive, but her mind was shattered. She told anyone who would listen that she had seen the true face of evil. The police doubled their efforts. A detective from the capital, known for his unconventional investigative methods, was called in. Detective Martin, after studying the case, concluded that the killer was not choosing his victims randomly. They were all somehow connected to that abandoned warehouse. Martin decided to set a trap. He stationed officers all around the warehouse, hoping the killer would strike again. The night was quiet, with only the wind howling through the empty streets. Suddenly, a figure entered the warehouse. The officers rushed towards him, but in the next moment, headlights blinded them all. When the light faded, the figure had vanished, leaving only coldness and emptiness. But Martin didn't give up. He continued to investigate the warehouse and discovered a hidden room. Inside were newspaper clippings, personal belongings of the victims, and strange symbols drawn in blood. In the center of the room lay a diary. Flipping through the pages, Martin realized that the killer believed in the summoning of ancient entities. On the last page was a note: "This night will be the last for the town." Martin understood that he had to act immediately, but it was too late. That night, Havil was engulfed in horror as the killer went on his hunt for the last time. Only one person survived to tell the tale: Detective Martin, who vowed to find and stop this evil, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. Months had passed since the last bloody night in Havil orchestrated by the serial killer. The town was deserted. Some had fled in fear for their lives, while others hid in their homes, fearing another attack. Detective Martin, haunted by scenes from the diary he had found, knew he couldn't leave this case unfinished. He relocated to the abandoned warehouse, turning it into his temporary base, studying every detail, every symbol, trying to understand the killer's motives. One night, Martin heard strange sounds coming from the forest near the warehouse. He grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate. Dense fog enveloped the trees, and every step echoed in the silence. Suddenly, a shadow flickered ahead. Martin quickened his pace, trying not to lose sight of it. The shadow led him to an old cemetery on the edge of town. Martin stopped in front of an ancient tombstone, carved with the same symbols as those in the diary. He examined it closely and noticed a small hidden door at the base of the monument. Opening it, he discovered a descent into a dungeon. With caution, the detective descended. The dungeon was cold and damp, illuminated only by the dim light of his flashlight. Drawings and inscriptions in an unknown language adorned the walls. In the center of the dungeon stood an altar, draped in black velvet. Martin approached and saw an ancient book. It was open to a page describing a ritual to summon ancient evil. Suddenly, the serial killer appeared from around the corner. He was a tall man with a face distorted by rage. His eyes burned with madness. He looked at Martin and grinned menacingly. "You'll never understand what's happening here," the killer said. "These victims are just the beginning. The town was meant to be a sacrifice for the awakening of a great power." Martin knew he couldn't let him complete the ritual. He lunged at the killer, and a brutal struggle ensued. In desperation, the detective knocked over the altar, and the book fell to the ground, its pages scattered across the room. The killer, seeing the destruction of his work, roared with rage. He grabbed a knife and advanced towards Martin, but the detective, managing to seize one of the old artifacts from the altar, struck him with it. The artifact glowed in the detective's hands, and the killer screamed as the light enveloped him. The light grew brighter, and soon the killer vanished, leaving only a shadow behind. The room emptied, silence filling the dungeon. Martin knew it wasn't over yet. He gathered all the evidence and left the cemetery, determined to continue his investigation to finally put an end to this evil. The town slowly began to return to normal life, but Martin couldn't rest. He felt that the evil was still nearby, that it hadn't disappeared completely.